Hello, everyone. Cat Allen here.
And Heidi Sormaz here.
Thank you for joining us. Today's teaching topic is what it means to uplevel your practice. And Heidi and I are going to discuss useful practices for helping you sharpen your teaching skills to connect to yourself, to connect to your students, and to connect to your authenticity. So Heidi, take it away.
All right. Well, the main thing I want to get across is to orient yourself well in order to change and in order to uplevel. Recognizing that upleveling is limitless and it's not about getting to any particular place. So I bet if you think of all the teachers that you think are really great, they're not the same. They all have different qualities. And these qualities are things that are born out of who they are, what their life experience is, and what their yoga practice is. So the main takeaway that I would love for you to get from me is that your teaching is your practice. Your teaching can be your spiritual practice. And honestly, in this day and age with yoga teaching, it can be pretty difficult. I'm not sure why you would continue to teach if this was not part of your practice. So I hope that you will consider approaching it that way. And when I think about spiritual practice, there are always two components that cultivate that practice. One you can refer to as seeing clearly what is. And the other is cultivating a compassionate presence. And they go together. You can't move forward on a spiritual path with just one. So, considering clear seeing, like, are we actually seeing clearly what is happening? Do we actually know what we're doing when we teach? Can we hear what we're saying? Do we understand how it is we're saying it, how it's coming across? Is our timing what we think it is? So we go in and, like, maybe we think, okay, I'm going to be really direct, but what people hear is super aggressive. Or maybe we go in being really nice. We want people to think we're nice. And it comes off as patronizing, like we're talking to little kids. Or maybe we go in and we're like, I'm going to be open to all levels and people doing what they need to do. And then the way we speak is vague and confusing. So part of this practice is getting to a place of seeing clearly what is happening when we teach. And all of our past experience is going to be factoring in to how we think it's going. So, like, for example, if you grew up in a house where there was a lot of yelling, you might go into yoga teaching thinking, I want to actively be soft and quiet and nurturing. But then in trying to do that, you might be coming off as not having any authority or not having any clarity. And then the students don't really know how to trust you as the leader in that room. So even if it feels good, you might not actually be seeing clearly what is happening in that situation. This is part of why we need other people and electronic devices. So first, it's really, really useful to see clearly, to be willing to listen to feedback from others. It can be very challenging when somebody lets us know what they think is not working for us. Definitely hard to hear. And if it's a habit, we might even not think that it's true. So I definitely had this experience when over a number of years, Anna Forrest kept telling me that I would trail off at the end of my sentence. So the last couple of words in my sentence got very quiet and people couldn't hear what I was saying. I admit, at first, I ignored that piece of feedback. I thought, there's lots of other things I need to be working on. And I just sort of ignored it. I didn't even really think it was true. It didn't feel that way to me. But I kept getting that feedback again and again. So I started to take a look at it. And I was doing it. And I recorded myself and I heard myself doing it. And then I had to go into like, why? And it really felt to me like I only had people's attention for a certain amount of time and they weren't really listening by the end of the sentence anyway. And I was making the assumption that they probably already know this. Like if I know it, I'm sure you know it. So why even finish the sentence? So there were a lot of strange things coming in that I simply wasn't aware of. And I really needed someone else to let me know that that was happening. So being willing to take feedback helps a lot in seeing clearly what's going on. It also helps a lot, as I already mentioned, to record yourself. To record your whole class and then take that class as a student. And if you can, take the class as a student like you don't know that person who's talking. And find out what your response is as a student. Study. Are you listening? Do you care? Can you actually hear that person at the end of the sentence? You can get a lot of information listening to yourself that you just can't get when you're in your own habits, which is what you're going to be a lot of the time when you teach. Now, when it comes to recording yourself, you need to be willing to practice some kindness and some acceptance. There will be stuff that you don't like, but there will also be stuff that you do. So going in even keeled and really just getting honest. This really works. This doesn't. Acceptance is a big one because we need to accept, like at a really fundamental level, change is uncomfortable. We have our habits for a reason. If I trail off at the end of a sentence, there's a reason, and it's a habit, and it makes me comfortable to do that. So it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable to try something different. So first, we just need to accept that that's true. We're going to have these moments of discomfort. We're also going to need to accept that we might actually get defensive or triggered about it. Because when we get uncomfortable, often the basis of that is fear. We're afraid. Oh no, I'm not good enough. Oh no, my classes have been horrible up until this point. And we may just really go into like fighting with someone if they give us feedback, or just getting triggered about it and not even realizing that our response is coming from this really old place. Like when I first started getting feedback about trailing off at the end of the sentence, I was like, that's not true. Totally triggered response. I was like, yeah, I don't think that's true. Whatever. I have these other things to deal with. And that was coming from a deeper place of not really wanting to sit with the discomfort of why did I do that? So your teaching is a spiritual practice. It's got these two components, needing to see clearly what's happening, but also developing a compassionate presence. Now, this acceptance stuff is much, much easier if you fully take into account this second criteria. You can't move forward on a spiritual path just seeing clearly. I mean, imagine you just sat down and looked at everything, and I'm like, and this is a challenge, and this is a challenge, and this needs to change. That's just overwhelming. And because we are smart animals, we won't do that, and we'll just stop. So you have to actually cultivate a kindness towards yourself when you're taking in this information so that you can be in a place that's okay. And it is our responsibility to create a safe space for ourselves when we are changing and when we're transforming. So it can really be as simple as when you're in the front of a room and you start to feel uncomfortable. and you're working on something you want to change, just putting your hands on your heart in a soothing way. Taking a moment to breathe and feel that you're okay and that you know how to generate a space for yourself that is okay. Forrest Yoga, we use the breath formula a lot. And part of this formula is that you inhale before you speak. This is the place where you can generate an energy that keeps you in a place where you can transform, where you can change. That in and of itself is an up level when you are attempting to speak. On a more intellectual level, developing a compassionate presence, it really helps to realize that this is a practice. And inherent in practice is a lack of perfection. You will be practicing it again and again and again. And as adults, we lose that understanding. Like when we look at a baby and that baby is learning to walk, they get up, they fall down. We go, yay, good try. Now, the 5th time they get up and they wobble around and they fall on their ass, they still go, yay, good try. But the 5th time we do the same old habit, usually our internal response is a little less positive than that. So we need to check our understanding of what it means to practice and meet ourselves in that moment of, oh, there's that thing again, in a more useful way. Another thing that will help with this idea of meeting ourselves in a more useful way is keeping it simple. So in a process of change, in a process of transformation, just choose one thing. If this is your spiritual practice, like, where do you gotta get? You got your whole life. Choose one thing. Pay attention to that one thing. Breathe in a way that allows you to take in what's happening with that one thing, even those moments when you're not getting it. And then you take a small step in the right direction. So an example of this for me was another piece of feedback that I got, which I believed absolutely, was that I was holding back emotion when I taught. I knew it, I felt it, but it took a while to study it. And each time it happened, I just tried to pay attention. What's going on? Why am I doing that right now? And what I realized was that in my head, I was actually repeating the phrase, don't freak out. And that came from a history of pretty intense anxiety. I had learned to use this cognitive strategy of just being like, don't freak out. And it helped me in a certain context. But in this context, what it was doing was sort of shoving down any emotion that I had. So once I realized that, I would notice it, take a deep breath, and I replaced the phrase with, freak out a little bit. Just freak out a little bit. And I would have a little bit of a wave of anxiety or fear or sadness or whatever it was. Only a small amount so I could deal with it, because that would be the compassionate way to go. But in allowing it to just come up a little bit, my voice sounded different and how my teaching went was different. Because if I allowed myself to freak out a little bit, but only to a degree that I could handle, my students could do the same thing. And then they could change and they could transform. So I highly, highly recommend that you use your teaching as a spiritual practice. And you find ways to work with clear seeing. And that's probably going to involve other people. Going to a training is a really good idea. You'll have the opportunity to risk getting feedback. Record yourself. listen to yourself. And then also really go after developing a compassionate presence towards yourself, a willingness to be kind. Without that second component, you will not progress the way that you want to. Over to you, Kat.
Am I on the screen?
You are.
Thanks, Heidi. I agree with everything that Heidi has said, and I've worked with those components in my own practice and my own teaching. In addition to that, what's important to me to up-level my own teaching is to do the work on the inside in order to effectively work on the outside. And I'm having a lot of fun playing with this. I've been teaching for many years. I've been practicing for many years. And I have done the work on the inside, and I continue to do that. I'm working with myself internally in a very different way as of recently, and that's through meditation. I've had a lot of epiphanies through my daily meditation. And I've seen and I've felt how my work and my meditation affects and up-levels my teaching. In essence, affects how I connect to my students and how they respond to me. The first thing is see and be seen. I don't have issues acting like I'm being seen. I can speak loudly, I can project, I can instruct students how to do something. And that has gotten me very far. Communicating clearly gets you far. And that is one of the foundations for connecting with your students. Feeling clearly, communicating clearly within, that's a whole other level. When I see the parts of myself that I habitually repel, I develop more kindness, compassion, and more resources on how to work with those areas inside of me. And then I begin to see those same issues within my students. And because I have been working internally with myself with those challenges and picking up those tools that work for me, I'm able to articulate that and share that with my students. And I've been witnessing my students have their own epiphanies on the mat because of what I've been sharing with them. How do I work inside myself? How do I allow myself to see and feel the things that I usually shove into a corner? And that brings me to my next point, which is being vulnerable to myself in my own safe space. There's a quality of attention that I've been able to cultivate when feeling my vulnerability in different areas of my body. And I have been up-leveling myself and instructing my students how to do that for themselves. And I do believe that we connect deeply with each other when we're able to soften and be vulnerable with boundaries. That's something else that I've learned in my own internal practice, my own internal work within doing the yoga poses, doing the meditation, mixing the meditation with the yoga poses and breathing. I have learned to set healthy boundaries to help myself feel safe with feeling vulnerable. And that is what I've been able to pass on to my students. This is stuff that I haven't necessarily done consistently in my years of teaching. And because of this new work that I'm doing, I'm bringing my students to a different place in their life, on the mat and off the mat. It's incredible. What's also important for up-leveling your teaching is documenting your epiphanies, documenting your challenges and how you work with them. You won't remember. We just won't, no matter how intelligent we think we are, or how good we think our memory is. Life happens and we lose our focus. Documenting, writing down, or recording through video or audio will help you to call up what you've learned and to continue to incorporate what you've learned into your practice and your teaching. That's important. We need to make time for ourselves to write it down. Something else that's really important for up-leveling our teaching is learning how to work within ourselves, how to feel pleasure, how to feel and process through suffering, and everything in between. So the spectrum of feeling. If you learn how to work with yourself, you learn how to teach in a way that coaxes your students to do the same for themselves. So they're not stuck in their suffering. How do you get them out of their suffering? How do you get them to acknowledge and accept what they're feeling so that they can move out of that place? I think that that's one of the pillars of transformation. As yoga teachers, we talk a lot about transformation. Oh, I want to help myself transform, my students transform. How do you do that? Working with that spectrum of feeling helps you to articulate how to do that. And it's not always like, it is more challenging to work with the suffering end of the spectrum, but it can be very challenging for people to feel pleasure too. How to work with pleasure, how to share the energy of pleasure throughout your cell tissue, and how to share and connect with other people. This stuff that you do on the mat, on the inside, affects your relationships, including the relationship that you have with your student, the teacher-student relationship. There was a time in my early teaching career where I wanted people to just feel joy, because it was like sort of the politically correct thing to do in the yoga world. Like, be happy and smile and, you know, do your practice, make it feel good. And that's valid. That's so important. But when somebody is on the mat and they feel like they're incapable of connecting to pleasure, they may feel like they're failing. Part of up-leveling your teaching is meeting people where they're at, meeting yourself where you're at in your own practice, meeting so you can learn how to meet your students where they're at. If you see a student, if I see a student who is going into failure because they feel like they're not practicing in a way that's meeting my expectations, then I need to call up, how do I work within myself to move through this energy, move this energy, and then speak that to the student, how they can work with themselves to move out of that stuck place. Receiving feedback in your own personal practice is just as important as receiving feedback on your teaching. There were many things that I was doing on the mat that Heidi refers to as habitual that I thought were working for me. And to have another set of eyes and another set of hands connect with me in a compassionate way and help me to feel and see a different way. And it's like, oh, this different way, it works. I'm coming to a new place. This feels amazing. To receive that kind of feedback up-levels me internally, and then I can share those epiphanies with my students as well. Connection is, I think, the underlying, the main theme that's weaving through all these points that I've shared with you today. Connect inside, and you'll do a better job connecting with your students in the external environment. That's what I got for up-leveling my teaching, and maybe that would help you too. That's some of the stuff that we provide in our teacher trainings. We give you feedback in a group setting with your teaching, and we give you feedback on a sort of one-on-one setting in the mornings. Heidi, you have anything to add to that?
We also give you a lot of practice with meditation. Yoga is a form of meditation, but sitting, just sitting, without doing asana can also give you a really different tool belt in terms of connecting inside and knowing really what is happening at any moment. So we do spend part of the ceremony time teaching meditation and practicing meditation.
Let's open up the floor to questions. I did not turn on the Q&A function before the webinar started, which means that the Q&A function is disabled. However, there are ways to ask us questions. I believe you may be able to chat with us. You could type in your question through the chat function. If you can't do that, you can email me at Catherine@forrestyoga.com. I am on my email right now, CATHERINE @forrestyoga.com, FORREST yoga.com. And we will start with, in the meantime, while we're waiting for your questions, we'll start with some common questions that we usually get for every single training. Heidi, what's the morning ceremony like before we start our asana practice?
There are always 3 components, at least. We always start with calling in 4 directions. So that is setting up, creating a sacred and a safe space. It is acknowledging that there is something bigger than you, and that which is bigger than you can help. And we ask for help. We take a moment to acknowledge our place in the universe and very specifically ask for help with our yoga ceremony. Then we move into Native American chanting, which has been a part of Forrest Yoga for as long as I've been involved. And then we move into the meditation section. I usually give a bit of a Dharma talk on some aspect of meditation, and then we practice a particular technique. There are many different types of techniques that we use, and we try to give you a spattering of techniques through the training so that by the end you have something that will work for you. Not every technique is immediately useful for every person, so we definitely try to give you a variety. Anything to add?
No. Oh, well, we also dance.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my favorite parts. Getting the body moving, waking up. That's part of the waking up in the morning ceremony.
Yep.
Meditation, the 4 directions, and the dancing. Singing and dancing. That is definitely part of ceremony to connect to spirit. And Heidi and I love to sing and dance. What's the afternoon sessions like?
The afternoon sessions focus primarily on teaching practice and information that would help you with your teaching practice. There is a lot of teaching each other and doing partner exercises to develop certain skills, voice skills, seeing skills, hands-on assist skills. But I believe the most effective practice for teaching is practice teaching. And this happens almost every day of the training. In my opinion, this is something that sets apart Forrest yoga trainings from many other trainings. We want you in front of a group immediately. It's not about being perfect. It's not about getting up there and knowing how to do it immediately. It's about practicing. It's about finding out what is working and then picking one thing to actually attempt to transform.
I want to add to that. If you want to understand something, if you want to deeply understand something, teach it. That is one of the benefits of this training. When you practice teach, you learn how to problem solve on a different level. You learn how to think critically on a different level for yourself and for your students. And what you teach your students, you observe, does this work? Maybe that doesn't work, but this works. You can incorporate that into your own practice. They sort of go hand in hand. So I was saying earlier, you do the work on the inside to connect on the outside. Also, when you do the work on the outside, it helps you to find ways to work internally. Does that make sense, Heidi?
Yeah.
The hands-on assist portions of the training happen throughout the day. In the last, I'd say, maybe like 90 minutes of the morning intensive, we usually do spotting each other in various arm balances. So you learn how to support your students, support a partner in gravity surfing, holding arm balances, how to speak clearly while you're spotting somebody, because that's part of creating the safety net for them. In the afternoons, we also have some time to do some really sweet hands-on assists, like there's that really famous Forrest yoga assist, the lying down spinal twist with massaging the back tension. You learn how to run energy. You'll get feedback from me and Heidi on a one-on-one situation. We've got the famous Forrest yoga hip opening frog assist, where people don't want to come out of that one because it's so sweet. Those are some of the hallmark assists that we'll be going over. And the Shavasana assist. You can't do a Forrest yoga training without that. You learn how to do the Shavasana assist, and your students will come back to class. Heidi, do you have anything to add?
Well, for me, the sweet assist I always remember is actually from the morning, and it's Lotus Bridge.
Ah, yes. What about that do you like?
The opening that is created working with a partner is just transformative. It's completely different than when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah. One thing that I learned in the advanced training when I took it was how to trust myself as a teacher and spotter. That was very helpful. In fact, when I learned how to trust myself, I became a better spotter.
And this is why we work together well, Cat. I learned how to trust the spotter.
Yes.
Because I used to pair up with someone and do the entire pose on my own. About me. So I learned how to trust you and other people who were spotting me.
Well, that brings up a great point. We learn how to be supported, especially for those of us who convince ourselves that we have to do it by ourselves and we need support. And then we learn how to support. That's right.
Yeah, and we get the reward of recognizing that when we let someone else support us, we find out something different. We move forward because it is a completely different situation.
I don't see any questions. No one's emailed me. I'm going to check Facebook though, just see if anybody
One thing to put out there is if you do see this webinar after it's already been recorded and it's up on YouTube, do feel free to email us. Email Catherine@forrestyoga.com and we will get back to you to answer your questions.
Yes, we will. The dates of our training are May 13th through the 21st. It's in Washington, D.C. It's 9 days. Cali Yoga Studio. For the first time ever in the history of Forrest Yoga, we have opened up the morning intensives to the public, and there are limited spots, 5 spots to be exact. You'd have to sign up for all 9 morning intensives to help hold the sacredness of the ceremony, the 9-day ceremony. That's why we're not taking drop-ins. And it gives you the opportunity to grow throughout the 9 days. Each day is another layer to add on, another layer of learning to add on to the previous day. If you want to learn how to uplevel your teaching, go to the entire training. If you only have time for the morning intensive, sign up through the Forrest Yoga website, forrestyoga.com. Anything to add, Heidi?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Contact us if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Bye-bye.